Okay, we're being recorded at this point. We're on YouTube right now. It's very important for y'all to know that this meeting has to meet publicly. We have to provide a notice at least 48 hours ahead of time. We have to keep minutes of these meetings. This is all, we have to abide by state law in everything we do. Outside of this meeting, please don't have conversations with each other about what you're discussing. If you run into each other, want to talk about grocery shop, and want to talk about traffic, feel free. Don't talk about this topic outside this meeting. It's very important that we maintain what we're supposed to maintain as far as the public notice and open meetings laws. A couple things that I sent y'all on this, and I'm going to give you some highlights, and then very quickly I'm going to turn things over to our chairman. Highlights of this, if you didn't get a chance to read it all. Districts should be compact and contiguous. Appearances matter. That's a case that came from Shaw versus Reno, a federal case, that the district should be compact and that the appearance does matter. This provides the possibility of creating minority representation that satisfies Supreme Court rulings. Districts should enable citizens of a district to relate to each other and the representatives and vice versa. Districts should respect communities of interest. Do not draw districts that intentionally dilute the impact of minorities. Do not intentionally protect or harm incumbents. Looking at addresses of current aldermen might generate bias of future decisions. If you know where the aldermen live, that's fine. If you don't, I would discourage you from figuring it out. I would want you to be able to say that you have no bias toward or against any current alderman right now. That will come up later on. It'd be nice if you could say that you did not do it with respect to any personal biases that you had. You may choose to change the number of wards and make that suggestion when you make a recommendation as you leave here. You may decide to draw 6 wards from scratch or 4 wards from scratch, or use the current 6 wards and adjust those. That's something that William and Keith are going to discuss with you in just a few minutes. I suggest you choose a base. It might be the current 6 wards. It might be the largest 6 subdivisions, the largest 4 subdivisions in the city of Hendersonville. Again, Keith is going to discuss that with you a little bit more as far as choosing a base. Staff is here to help you, not just Keith and Lauren, but the entire staff of the city of Hendersonville. Myself, our city attorney, other planners. If you feel like the fire department, if you feel like municipal technical advisory service could be helpful, if you feel like our election coordinator could be helpful, I'm happy to get a hold of those folks and tell them that you would like some of their input. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a recommendation to the board. They may completely throw it out. They may change it. I suspect, having been on that board for 5 years and 4 years before that, that the more simple your recommendation and the fewer changes you make, the more likely it is to be accepted in total. One other thing, you may have heard some comments recently about the comptroller's role, about party affiliation, about transparency, about changes to the ordinance. Some of those comments were absolutely false. They were not true. Please don't take anything that you hear about this as true until you turn to one of our staff, and I would really suggest that be Keith. So when you hear somebody make a comment about the process that's going on here and about what you're supposed to put together, please don't just assume the person who said that has the correct information. I'm going to step aside now, and I'll probably watch the rest of this on YouTube. Thank y'all. Appreciate very much what y'all are doing.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to emphasize what Jamie said, can you hear me?
Just push your bottom button. There you go.
This is so fancy for me. My Appalachian skills are... like Jamie said, appreciate you guys being here. This is a volunteer board, and so you guys volunteered your time to be here, and I really appreciate that. I know Jamie does, and so does Keith. I want to welcome you here, and my name is William Stiles. I'll be chairing the committee, or at least trying to. Just a few housekeeping things. One, I want to respect y'all's time. You are volunteer here. You are not elected, and so I want to respect the time that we have here. We have a 2-hour meeting. I'd like to keep it to that. You guys have families, and we have things to do. So if it goes past that, it goes past that. But I'd like to try to keep time if we can. I'd like to try to do a round robin if we can keep it to that. So I'm going to start with my left. So we'll start with Aaron. Every topic that we get to, we'll start here. Aaron, you're first every time. And then we're going to go to Miss Debbie. We'll go to Miss Pat, so forth and so on. And I'd like to keep it at 2 minutes. Okay, and then we'll have discussion afterwards, okay? So I'd like to see if anyone would like to volunteer to be timekeeper. Do we have a volunteer to keep time? Okay. All right. We will have a 10-minute break at the hour mark for restrooms. Other than that, is everybody okay with that, or is there any questions? Okay, great. Before we get started and we hand it over to Keith, I just want to do some introductions. We're going to start with me, and then we'll go to Aaron, okay? And what I want you to do is 3 things. Just give us your name, who you are, kids, family, what you love, hiking, whatever. And I want you to tell us why you wanted to be on this committee or what value you think you bring to this committee. So I'll start us off. My name is William Stiles. I'm from the hills of North Carolina and Appalachia. I've got a beautiful wife and 3 kids, and we moved here March 2020. Great time to move 3 kids, 5 hours away. And so we spend a lot of time at the ball field. I have a 7, 5, and 3-year-old, so we do a lot of softball and baseball and a lot of different things. I'm very involved in the community. I'm on several nonprofit boards, and I really enjoy that. I work in Country Financial Insurance and Financial Sales. I've been doing that for 11 years, first with North Carolina Farm Bureau and then here. The value or why I wanted to be on this board was I was a poli-sci major in college many years ago, and I've worked on campaigns in North Carolina. I've worked in Washington, D.C. with Congressman Heath Shuler. We were talking about that earlier. And so, in my opinion, state and local government is the most important thing that impacts you every day. Federal is great, and they do a lot of things, but your state and local government, especially your city council and your commissioners, affect you daily. And so what we're doing here today is very impactful. Okay, Aaron, if you'll go next.
My name is Aaron Hawkins. My background is I was a mathematics major twice over. In my undergrad, I have my master's, my MBA in finance. I've been in corporate treasury and finance for the last 22 years. I have a beautiful wife as well and 2 wonderful daughters. I agree with you that the local, state and local government is the impactful part of the governing process. And so I'm excited to be here because I really do care about the community. I really do. So this is a way to give back in some small form or fashion. I also sit on the board, a couple of nonprofit boards, and I do volunteer my time with the Hendersonville Parks and Rec. I was a soccer coach for a bunch of seasons, and
we're doing that next year. So
I'm a long distance runner is what my pastime is. So I have been up and down just about every single road in the greater Hendersonville area.
Awesome. All right, Miss Debbie.
My name is Debbie Ruttenberg. My name is Debbie Ruttenberg. Is that all right?
Yours is good. His worked automatically. So
Mine didn't seem to.
his is special.
My name is Debbie Ruttenberg, and I have 9 children with my husband. Yes. I have a tiara for that, I'm sure, somewhere. But except for 8 years we lived away, we've raised our children in Hendersonville. I'm a product of Hendersonville schools. I went to Lipscomb. Actually, I have an undergrad in psychology and a master's in teaching from Austin Peay. And our children, except for our 2 who are in the military, have all stayed local, and I feel that what I bring to this committee is really, I've watched Hendersonville since my parents bought a house here. I mean, I was young. I wasn't old enough to even be aware when my parents bought a house here, but it was 1972. So I've lived here or had a presence here with my family since 1972. I actually graduated high school with Jamie, and I feel that just having watched Hendersonville grow and change, I have a really invested desire to see Hendersonville continue to be the amazing community that it has been, and
That's awesome.
to fulfill its potential.
What's their ages? Can you keep track of 9 kids' ages, birthdays?
Yes, believe it or not, I
Give
can
a reminder
recite
in your
birthdays
phone?
backwards and forwards. I'll save you for that, but they're from 17, so we have 1 not in college. She's a senior at the school where I teach in White House Heritage, and to 30.
Wow. Good for you. That is fantastic. I have a hard enough time with 3. 9, I would lose my
They
mind.
keep you busy. Oh, I forgot to say what we do for a hobby. We ride horses and we fox hunt in our spare time with,
What kind of horses?
well, it ranges. I have a quarter horse. My daughter has a thoroughbred, so it ranges in different things. It's all about, for us, it's fox hunting. so.
We always had Tennessee racking horses. I couldn't
Yeah,
understand
none of our
quarter
horses are
horses.
dated, so.
All right, Miss Pat?
Hi, I'm Pat Collins. I moved here a little over 10 years ago from Chicago, Illinois. I have a wonderful husband. We have one daughter. She decided to move here as well. And what I did, I started at Tennessee State University and finished at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. I ran skills programs. I've been in every aspect: corporate America at Montgomery Ward, fast foods at KFC, and finished and retired from the City Colleges of Chicago for 30 years. I ran skills programs over that time, which was automotive, cosmetology, major home appliance. And now I'm here. The reason why I wanted, there were several reasons why. Not really knowing the South, even though my heritage is from the South, and hearing about gerrymandering, okay? My parents were lobbyists in the state of Illinois. So it's something that I grew up with, and from high school, I always participated in voters registration and things like that. So I have a passion, a real passion for it. And it's a new experience because being on this committee, this is not an opportunity I would have gotten it in Cook County because of it being such a large metropolitan area.
Yeah.
So it's something that gives me another aspect of, the Election Commission, because I'm also, even though in this capacity I'm a private citizen, but I'm also one of the election commissioners here in Sumner County.
Oh, nice. Very good. Election Commissioner. Okay. Thank you, Pat. Mr. Mitchell?
Great, yeah, so my name is Greg Mitchell. I'm a native of Denver, Colorado, but I now have claimed I'm a converted Southerner. My wife
Colorado's kind of south, isn't it?
it's a little south.
Yeah.
South of the,
Yeah.
Dakotas.
Right.
But my wife and I, we've been in the Nashville area for about 20 years. We've been in Hendersonville for 15 years. Our kids, we have 3 kids. They all attended schools here in Hendersonville. Nanny Berry, Merrill Hyde, Ellis, and Hendersonville. We are now empty nesters. All 3 have finished college, and they're all doing their things respectively now. But I was telling William that this community has been good for us. We've enjoyed living here. We've had absolutely no issues here. I have served as a soccer coach as well when my kids played over at the parks there.
Soccer players. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. It was
Crazy.
Girls soccer
Oh.
too. And, but currently, I am president of the Sumner County Lacrosse Association. I've held this role for about 7 years now. My son played lacrosse. He started as a 7th grader. After he realized he couldn't play soccer, and he realized that, okay, I could hit people with a stick. 13, I want to do this. So he played for high school, went on to play 4 years at the collegiate level, and I stayed around as club president. So we're in the process now of growing the sport in the community. It's a great sport. I also coach as well. My wife, we've been married for 28 years, and she works in Davidson County for United Way of Metro Nashville.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. All right. Miss Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Slattery. I have lived in Hendersonville for almost 6 years, and I say quite frequently I made the conscious decision to live here. I work from my home. I'm in healthcare, in medical equipment, and I could choose anywhere. At the time we were moving here, I came from Maryland. I'm originally from Mississippi. You can't get much southerner than that. But we jokingly talk, my mother came with me, and we jokingly talk about looking everywhere, literally, from Springfield and Columbia to Ashland City to Cairo out in just beyond Gallatin, and we chose this area. That is one of the reasons I'm very excited to be on the committee, is that this is where we are invested. This is my home, and I've never lived in an area. I'm an Air Force brat, so I've lived in a lot of areas, but I've never lived in an area that is experiencing the level of growth that we see around us.
Yeah.
And I can see the change just in 6 years. I've stopped telling people how wonderful the Nashville, Middle Tennessee area is because they all believe us and they come. But I think it's very important, if we're going to invest in our community, that we understand how our community will be led. I agree that local politics is that affects us most directly on a day-to-day basis. and I firmly believe that you can't voice an opinion if you're not willing to voice your time. So I'm
Very good.
here hopefully to contribute.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. All right, Mr. Mike?
My name is Mike Tummons, and I've lived in Hendersonville for 47 years. Grew up on the Gatone Peninsula, on the Saunders Ferry Peninsula, went through schools there, Hawkins, Hendersonville High School. My wife graduated from Beach High School. We both live back in off of High Point, Anchorage. We both graduated from Western Kentucky University. I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering technology, and she was an educator. We love Hendersonville. Both our kids went through Hendersonville High School. My son actually is a teacher and a soccer coach at Hendersonville High School now. My daughter lives in Boston. We love Hendersonville. I think that's the big reason I wanted to serve on this committee. I've been involved in the soccer programs at the park and Hendersonville High School, et cetera. But to be on a committee of just citizens, I think is pretty awesome to see people work together and to try to accomplish something together as just citizens.
Yeah, that's great, Mike. Appreciate that. So you're definitely the longest-serving citizen of Hendersonville, I think.
I think Debbie's been here quite a while.
Oh, Debbie, yeah, that's right. Debbie'd been here for a little while, too, so.
I think she's got me about 4 years or something. 76 is when I think I moved.
She took 8 years off.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you still got it.
So you got
I mean, I've seen, like I said, I've seen a lot of good in Hendersonville, and I've seen a lot of bad in Hendersonville, but I think the good outweighs the bad any day. And I've been here, I played baseball across the park where the tennis courts are now, and so I've seen this city just grow leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see, but it's also daunting to see, too, so.
Something that Mike and Miss Pat said, too, was, I think you mentioned gerrymandering, and it's something that you see a lot. I studied that a lot in school, and you see some states that are in that. And like you said, this is a citizens board. It's a citizen's opinion. What we say here does have a lot of heavy weight. So I'm really excited about that.
And let me add this too. William, can I add this real quick? One of the things I did not,
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to, I work in public relations and corporate communications. One of the things that the mayor and I talked about, just professionally, words matter, and how we say things are very critical. And I've driven around the city and I've seen the signs related to this topic that we're going to be studying here. So what I kind of hope to add is the right phraseology, right, where we can.
That sounds right to me. I don't know. My Appalachian is a little.
But where we can communicate clearly.
Correct.
And without any ambiguity, because, words really do matter a lot.
Yeah, correct.
So,
Very good.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Thank you. All right. Thank you all for doing that. We're going to be together for a while, and so I wanted to make sure everybody had good introductions. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to our planning director, Keith Free, for his introductions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly want to welcome everybody here this evening. I'll just be very brief. I think everyone has had the opportunity to see the document that the mayor had sent from the comptroller's office that kind of outlines some of the parameters of redistricting. Currently, as you can see on the map that you all have in front of you, also is up on the wall. The city currently has 6 different wards, and they're distributed as you can see. This very closely resembles. It has changed slightly, but as population has increased through the years, but this appears to be very similar to what the wards were back in 2000, and of course they were redone in 2010 to be what you see before you today. We have experienced in the last 10 years, according to the census, we've been increased in population by more than 10,000. So, and all of this population gain has not just happened in one ward. There are wards that have had more significant population increase than others, but definitely with the population increases that we've had, there is a need to move these wards. This is the first time that there's been a committee created like this that we're aware of to assist in this redistricting process. So this is all kind of new. but we're trying to follow the comptroller's guidelines in the process of the creation of this committee, and then how the committee will function. We will maintain minutes, and we'll have those, and at such time that you make the recommendation to BOMA, then that'll be supported by the minutes of all the meetings. And of course, as you're aware, this is being live streamed for the public to see as well. And as far as the role of the planning staff in regards to this redistricting effort, myself and the entire planning staff are at the disposal of this committee, and to assist you in any way that you want. We have not created any potential lines or districts. We've totally stayed away from that, waiting for the direction of this committee. One of the things that we have, and we'll probably get into this in probably possibly the next meeting, is we have software, mapping software, where this is easily for us in the planning department. We can easily manipulate and look at, draw lines, and then see all the different information on population, demographics, and all of those types of information. So that'll be something that I believe we'll have the ability in future meetings, where I'll have our mapping specialist here, and we'll be able to adjust any lines and talk about things in detail and see it in real time. So that's going to be an opportunity that I don't think maybe in previous years the technology wasn't that readily available, but it will be available for this committee to use as much as that you would want to direct us to do so. In looking at all the populations, any specific questions anyone had as we go on can be directed to me, and I'll do my best to answer any questions. We're pretty familiar with all of the census data and all the historical data and the demographics. The 10th, looking at that, one thing I just may mention is our growth over the last 10 years of that 10,000 plus is that actually a lot of things have changed with our demographic makeup of the populations that we have, and that it appears to be that 80% of the growth that we had of that 10,000 was in non-white population. So there's, and then looking at, and we'll probably talk about some of the distribution of the demographics of the population as we look at the different wards, but assessing it, depending on how the lines are drawn, looking at the information on the totality, it appears that the distribution of all of the different types of folks that live in this community are pretty evenly distributed across the community. There isn't, and that's somewhat unique, but not necessarily for a community like ours that is a little over, I guess, 50 years old, I believe now. So that's something that's typical to where we're a newer city. So our development has occurred over the last 50 years, and the distribution of our population is pretty evenly dispersed throughout the community. So and that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Keith. Now I'd just like to go over a few things real quick. So at this point, I just want to go over the topics of the meeting, and then we'll go ahead and start with each topic and kind of go through that round robin style. Ms. Wendy, if you'll keep time. So a couple things I just want to mention. If you look at the map there, and Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is the same map that's been around for a long time, right? Okay, longer than that, wasn't it? This is the same map?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this map has been around for 10 years. Prior to that, there was a different ward boundaries, but it was very closely. It was just a little.
It's always been 6 with 12 representatives.
6,
Okay.
that's correct.
And and Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the way I understand it now is the state law is that there can only be 8 representatives within a city municipality. Is that right? But we're
yeah.
grandfathered in at 12
Yes,
right now.
that's correct.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So you'll see there that the line number, determined number of wards is, the question is, since we have 12 and the state recommends 8, Do we have too many? Should we shrink this down to 4 wards with 2 representatives in each? Now, the reason I'm saying that is 12 seems like a very large number, in my opinion. It seems like a lot. If you have 2 people from each ward and you ask one representative a question, I mean, he's just going to say, well, ask the other guy, right? So I would like to know your opinion on our first line item is 6 good? Should we shrink it to 5, 4? What's your opinion? Aaron, you start.
I'd really want to see the census data because I would want to know how many people they represent, right? And so you have a growth of 10,000 plus people. You have 12 people that represented 50,000, call it 50,000 10 years ago. You have 12 that represent 60,000. I think 12 is too many because just to get, I think you have ebbs and flows in a 12 that you, when you get a majority or, you know, the ebbs and flows just doesn't feel right with a 12. So I'm not averse to the 6 wards, but I think 12 may be too many. So it may be 1 representative per ward, but again, it may be 4 wards, 2 representatives each. I would like to see how many people they represent.
That's fine. Ms. Debbie?
I don't sing.
I would love to know what other, what the state recommends. So if they have, currently 8 representatives is allowed, we have 12 are grandfathered in. Is the standard 1 representative per ward?
There isn't specifically per ward. That's for the municipalities to kind of figure out. But the 8 comes if you were just creating a city today, then those would be the guidelines.
So a
so
new
the
city
8
wouldn't have more than 8
Wouldn't have,
wards.
that's correct, wouldn't have more than 8. That's correct.
Okay.
May have fewer, but not more than 8.
Write that down. Come back to you. Come back to you.
Okay, so, so 1 per may or may not be standard. The simple number is that 8 is the recommended number. We have 12 are grandfathered in. So without changing the number of wards, we could go down to 6, be under that limit, but you can't, you shouldn't have more than 8 based on the state standard.
So the state standard is 8.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we can't have 12.
Right, oh, yeah, we're grandfathered in, we can keep that, I understand. I was just curious about what their recommendation was for that, so, all right.
Ms. Pat?
I'm not a numbers person, but in the census for before the 2020, there were a population of over 51,000, okay? For the 2020 census, I believe the population grew to 61,753. And I also question about the ward and having 2 aldermen in a ward because of different thinking. And that's something that I think that needs to be considered, because they each, you know, just coming to the Bowman meetings and observing, they each have their different opinions. And sometimes they don't agree that affects us as constituents across the board. Okay, so that's something I think that we would consider. But let me get off topic real quick because, and this goes back to the deadline, I'm not sure how many are aware that the census, the information that the city got is 3 months behind. I'm not sure if you all were aware of that. And what has happened is the time frame that we are now given, we are on a very tight schedule. And thank goodness that the mayor did a November, I think, deadline for us at least to come to some decisions to recommend to the board. And then it has to go to the election commission. So we need to be, you know, be constant, you know, cognizant of time frame as well.
I think January 1st is the time
That's
frame they have. Is that right? Okay, yeah.
That's correct. Okay. So, but so looking at the population, and not only that, I'm sorry, 30, thank you. And looking at the population and how it would affect going into 2030 is also a factor as a projection to look at as well, that I think that can help across the city totally.
Initially, I agree with Aaron. I would like to see just the census data to see kind of the population numbers within each of the 6.
Do we want to just stop right now and just get some of the information? Let's just do that. Keith, can you fill us in on some numbers?
Yes, I can do that, and we can get these, if that's one of the things that the committee wants to direct staff, we'll get you all that information.
And I wasn't asking for that now, because I'm
Yeah.
sure at some point
Yeah.
it's relevant to our discussion here. So
Yeah.
I don't need it now, but I think that
Right.
will certainly help me.
I can do it, no, I can do it.
Yeah.
We can talk about that,
Yeah.
actually, I think that
Fine.
would be,
Great.
Let's go ahead and
Yeah.
take a few minutes. Let's take a few minutes to do that, to go over the data that we have for 2020, and that way everybody
Yes.
has a clear mind, and then we'll start back, Mr. Mitchell, with you, and then we'll come back around, okay? Hold that thought, Aaron.
okay. And I'll just kind of go through this, and keep in mind, too, that the target idea population, with everything being perfect, if we maintain 6 wards, then the population we want to maintain is 10,292 per ward. If that changes to some other number, then of course you just divide the number of wards by the total population. But let's look at Ward 1 first, and that's the tan area right there, kind of khaki ward. And looking at that, and what I'll do is I'll just go through real quick and I'll hit what the 2000 population was for this, roughly this specific area as it's drawn, even though that wasn't the exact thing, just to give you a point of reference. And so in Ward 1, in 2000, the total population was 6,724. That increased in 2010 to 8,467, and then today, that's 9,308. In Ward 2, that's on the map in the purple area, in 2000, that total population was 6,476. That increased in 2010 to 8,335, and today that's increased to 10,084. Ward number 3, that's represented there in kind of a mauve color, 2000, that was 7,350 residents. In 2010, it was increased to 8,518, and currently today, that had a slight increase of 8,000 to 8,891. In Ward number 4, that's in the blue area, in 2000, the population in Ward number 4 was 6,846. That increased in 2010 to 8,317. And then today, that's increased to 9,128. In Ward number 5, that is a darker green color on your map, in 2000, that was 7,126 people. It increased in 2010 to 8,933, and has increased up to, in 2020, to 13,437. That's a significant increase. In Ward number 6, that's that final area in a lighter green on your map. In 2000, that was 8,399. In 2010, a slight increase to 8,802. And in 2020, today, was a significant increase to 10,905. So that kind of gives you an idea that all of the wards have increased. Some have increased a little bit more significantly over that.
Keith, why don't you talk
20-year
about why it is that 5 and 6 grew so much more than the rest of the wards?
Yeah. 5 and 6 is the location of, out on Saundersville Road. So you have Saundersville Station and Wind Creek, you have all of those developments out toward the schools that are located out in the county. So you have all of that development that has occurred there. In Ward number 6, the dominant factor there is Durham Farms, and there's other developments, Fountain Brook and Norman Creek and other developments that have increased within that area. And then also, what Pat was talking about, looking toward the future, we definitely have a pretty good handle on where the growth is going to occur and what those populations should be within the wards. The majority of the growth is going to occur in Ward 6, Ward 5, and Ward 3. That's where the significant growth.
And is that just because that's where the developments are?
Yes, that's where the developments that are already been approved are located at, and there's still a lot of units to build, and most of those will be built over the next 10
And then
years.
what's the development in 3?
3 would be Mansker Farms.
So under those projections, and that was the question that I was holding until my 2 minutes, are we to consider those projections as well, or are we to be guided solely by the certified census data? Because we are in such a growth period in our city's history. A lot will happen just in the next 12 months, if the last 12 months are any indication.
We certainly, we want to take that into consideration, but it can't be a driving factor.
Okay.
We're going to be limited by the margin of how much higher any one ward can be than to that 10,292 population if it's 6 wards, and how much lower, and then what that range is between those. So we may know, hey, this is going to grow by 4,000 or 5,000 people, but we may not be able to make the boundary big enough to take it into account, but we might make it 1,000 less, knowing that there's going to be some growth. So it doesn't make it work out perfect, but it gets it close.
I would suggest that we even come up with some parameters around projections to be considered. So approved and under construction, or at least some percentage completed in a neighborhood, because these things can go on ad infinitum if you look at some neighborhoods.
So something I would just suggest to that question, because I think that's a fantastic idea, is we go to the board and say, hey, look, here's what we'd like to see, here's our secondary, and maybe here's a third option, just from what we have gathered here information-wise. So that's a great question.
Well, and a big factor, I suspect, with the creation, or soon-to-be opening of Liberty Creek High School, they're in District or Ward 6, right? I'm guessing?
Yeah, that actually is all located deep within Sumner County.
Oh.
And actually close in
Cottontown.
in proximity to Gallatin city
Oh.
limits, but it won't impact our population, yeah.
Well, I think if you look at it, and there's 10,000 people basically per ward that you're trying to get these to, that I think 6 wards, and it's hard to tell, but with somebody, one man, if you went to 6 aldermen, one man handling 10,000 people could be a chore. As far as the number of aldermen go, I don't know if that's going to be an issue or not. I also was wondering, I see in this map here a big gap in the middle that's white. Is there any plans for annexations at this point for like these that are not in the city limits that are?
Yes, it would definitely appear that would be the case, that it would fall right into to our city limits. It's kind of a donut hole. Yeah, that actually is just a residential development out there in the county. Tennessee laws have changed through the years. We're basically, as a city, we cannot annex property unless we are asked to do so. So we can't force our way into annexation. So, it's very, very unlikely that any of those areas in the white would necessarily be coming in to ask for annexation, other than if there was a particular development that wanted to develop on a existing vacant, large tract and want to do a residential development of some sort, we might have that. But that area that you're referring to, Mr. Tummons, that probably would stay in the county and wouldn't be in the city for population purposes, unless something changed in the future on the laws, or originating from everybody in that neighborhood.
A couple housekeeping. Wayne was in the middle of his 2 minutes.
You want to go back to your 2 minutes, or we're gonna come back around anyway, so. Oh, well, you go ahead. I thought you did your 2 minutes.
No, that's right. You actually still have time if you have anything else. Okay. So I think most of the concerns are commonly being. Sorry. Most of our concerns are very common. I do have questions about how much one alderman can support. And I wonder if that is more intensive with new residents that are new to the area and new to the lifestyle and just new to the politics and the community interaction versus someone who has lived here for 47 years and sort of knows how things work, knows where to go get support and resources. So I just wonder if, I think 12 aldermen is too many. I do. I think it's too many. Watching the vote and just the comment period is cumbersome. But I have questions at the same time about how much one alderman can support, again, in a time of extensive growth and a lot of demand for support. Thank you.
That's great, Wendy. I really appreciate that. So, I just want to reiterate what you were saying. So you think that 6 wards is good because the population is 60, so it kind of evens it out?
I think at this point, with the growth that Hendersonville is experiencing, I think that's where you need to stay.
Okay,
I
6
do,
wards. I just want to reiterate. And then, because it's 10,000, and then 2 reps to support the 2. And Wendy, you're kind of saying the same thing, is that
I am with
right?
one question for Keith.
Yeah.
That state recommendation, understanding we're grandfathered in, but that current guideline of no more than 8 aldermen, is that based on a certain size municipality? Are we right at the limit of that 8 and we're about to kick over into whatever the next
It's a great
level is?
question. It's a great question.
That would probably have to be something I would need to speak to legal counsel, but
Okay.
all of that it's not necessarily a recommendation, it's just what the state law, what the state statutes kind of are.
Yeah.
And, that limit that maximum.
you're not aware right now if it's based on population of the municipality?
I don't believe it is, but I would check before our next meeting, and I'll get that answer.
Can you
from
get that for
city
the next
attorney.
meeting?
Yes.
That'd be great. Okay.
Thank you. I'm
All
done.
right. Okay, all right. Aaron?
And so, I'm a big fan of not recreating the wheel, right? And so there's other similarly sized cities that have high-functioning, board of aldermen. I would like to know how many alderpersons there are on those boards, right? I don't, and the other thing is because you have a fast-growing community, I'm assuming because we're grandfathered in, if we go down and clip that back to 8, you can't go back. It ratchets, there is an in and out. So, that has to be a consideration. But there are other municipalities the same size that we have, that have, I'm assuming, high-functioning local board of aldermen. So it's something you can replicate, right?
Yeah. Keith, do you have any knowledge, or do you know anybody on your staff that would have knowledge of what other municipalities have done?
The staff would be happy if the committee directs us to.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to do some research and bring that back to the next meeting and evaluate just other cities in Middle Tennessee for comparatively how many wards they may have and then how many aldermen and that type of thing. You probably do want to limit it to municipalities, not to county governments. Yeah. Yeah.
And that addresses the number of constituents that each represents as well. And so, I thought that would address more than one concern that we had.
Okay. Debbie, going back to you, anything else you'd like to add to that discussion?
No, my fellow chair people articulated it as well as it could be done. And so that was my question too originally, is like, what is that based on? Is it just an arbitrary 8 people? Like if you're,
Yeah.
no matter how big you are, or is that saying cities can't be bigger than 80,000, which of course that's not what they're doing. So obviously, if we can see a roadmap that somebody else is doing, that would give us some guidance as to how well their city is being run, how they're, if they have 8, how does it look with about the same population? I would really appreciate that as well. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Great question, Debbie. Miss Pat?
I'm trying to think in my mind what cities right now have a population as close as Hendersonville. I know Gallatin is really growing. Maybe Franklin or, let's see, Franklin, Brentwood possibly. I'm not sure. I know there's, what city is in Rutherford County? Mount Juliet is growing. Murfreesboro. Murfreesboro. And I know those are growing tremendously.
Mount
because of
Juliet,
yeah,
Lebanon.
they're really growing, so maybe possibly that may be a place to start, to get numbers and to see what what their boards do in fact have. And have they grown within from, within the past 10 years, and have they made any type of changes in their ward boundaries?
Yeah.
Just to see, and have they had to change boundaries that affected the wards and the, alderman type of thing? And
Yeah.
has that worked out?
It's a great
So
question.
that may be a possibility, even if we have to, I don't think we have to go into another state, because I think we have what we need right here in Tennessee to do that, because there is so much growth, coming to the state itself.
Great. Mr. Mitchell?
No, I don't really have anything, I don't find any objections to having the 12 aldermen. I'm not opposed to it, I'm not necessarily for it. A comment was raised here on the level of responsiveness to the constituents within each ward. Maybe, could one alderman support one ward? Perhaps given the growth of Ward 6, do they need more? Because I think that area is just going to continue to grow. I would imagine wards 5 and 6, well, especially 5 with 13,000 now. Do they need more aldermen? I don't know. Could we function with the 12, but reassign? That may not be possible, but just based on constituent needs.
Okay.
Just one other question, Keith, for you. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Sorry.
Whew.
That was an aggressive point. I didn't
Boy,
mean to point that.
That was
It
a
an
soccer
aggressive
coach point.
Sorry.
No, you play that position.
That was my T-ball. Get over there. Sorry. Dugout dad came
One
out.
other question, Keith, when you're starting to do some research, and I think it will be very helpful for us to see some examples of those that have walked the path, I do wonder if there are other cities that have made the downshift in the number of aldermen. And, when they did that, and could we possibly speak to them? If we're seriously going to consider that as one possible path, would love to hear what the 12, 24, and 36-month fallout was of a dramatic shift in the number of aldermen. That would be interesting to know.
Yeah. Great question. Mr. Mike?
That-
Oh, go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
That may be difficult to really ascertain. It's probably more a nuanced thing, where we could definitely do the data and get the data on all the cities on what they have, but I think it'd be difficult to really get into what you're talking about there, on, that did they reduce it down to a smaller number of wards, and then how has that worked out? It just would depend on who we talk to, because we may, that would something be very difficult. And I think that's something as you're looking at here, is that there are a lot of very unique things, even though it's good to look at what other places do, there's a lot of uniqueness to Hendersonville, and that there may be a unique thing that the committee comes up with that, after kind of looking at what everybody else has, that necessarily won't be a copy of what somebody, because we, just kind of be aware of that. I don't think there's necessarily a perfect thing that we could necessarily duplicate from another community in this particular arena.
Yeah, great question. Okay, Mr. Mike?
Is the number of aldermen stated in the city charter, is that going to be a huge uphill battle to change something like that? Or, I don't know if that's part of the city charter that names how many aldermen there should be, and
Yeah, that would be a question I would need to get with our legal counsel on, but I believe that all those specifics are included within that charter. And certainly there's the process of where are these ward boundaries going to be? How many wards are there going to be? You may have recommendations in regards to the number, but it's very possible that issue about the number, would be something that BOMA would have to take up after this is resolved. As far as the timing, I don't know that, I would need to talk to legal counsel, but I don't know that the timing would allow all that to do it. But certainly, it's something the committee can consider, and include in your recommendation, understanding that the time frame that's involved in this, that changing the charter, doing whatever needs to be done through the state statute, and having all that done being recognized. And I'll talk to legal counsel about that, but that's a little bit longer
Yeah,
path.
yeah. All right, great question. Anything else, Mike? Okay. Let's move on to the next one. So we got about 10 minutes before our break. I want to hit just a few things here, and I want Keith to talk about this. So determine the ideal population and the number of wards. We kind of discussed that, and we've got some ideas to take to the planning committee so they can maybe get to work on that. Well, I'd like I should have said this the meaning of this committee meeting today is so that the planning committee can go back to the drawing board, and when we meet at the next meeting, they can say, okay, here's 5 maps that we put together to choose from. Do any of these look good? No. Okay, what would look good out of these 3, 4, 5 maps? And so we'd like to leave this meeting today with something to give the planning board some ideas on some maps to draw so that when we meet next time, we'll have something to go off of. Does that make sense? Okay. So skipping down to the allowable relevant deviation. Keith, you want to talk about that just for a few minutes?
Yes. If we're looking at 6 wards, the idea population would be 10,292, and a 5% deviation of that, just in talking a generalization, is about 514. And a 10% deviation, which I would not suggest we go over 10%, it's probably better to go to 5, but, and there's not a specific percentage, although the comptroller does sort of list 10% as the top. But 10% of that for 6 wards would be a little over 1,000, so 1,029. So you're looking at somewhere between 500 and to 1,000, where one ward could be a little less and one ward could be a little more. But understanding we're going to look at it across all wards as to which one is, 480 lower, and then this one's, 800 higher, and then what is that difference? And we've got to stay within these deviations.
Okay, so. You got me? Okay. I had to point myself, Wendy. So let's go to the next one, and then I want to do a discussion of those things that Keith talks about. So review of comptroller's direction on minority representation. Keith, if you could give us an overview of that within the city, what the minority population is in the city and how it is distributed by ward would be great.
Yes. Let me,
And just for housekeeping purposes, this will be the last item we'll meet before break, and then we'll do a round robin right after Keith gives this for discussion, and then we'll take break, and then we'll come back and finish the rest of the items.
looking at the distribution, I'll just, let me just kind of go down through some of these, and I'll try to do it fairly quickly. The Hispanic population in Ward 1 is 6.75, in Ward 2, 4.99, in Ward 3, 9.07, in Ward 4, 3.83, in Ward 5, 4.95, and Ward 6, 9.32. Citywide, that's about 6.43. So when you look at citywide, it's 6.43. There's a range that's occurring within these each one of these existing identified wards, 1 through 6, but no significant. There's not any double-digit differences. So there's just slight variation, which adds to the distribution that I was talking to earlier, where there's a distribution throughout all the wards. And looking at the non-Hispanic population, when I look at that for white only, in Ward 1 is 77.5, Ward 2, 81.5, Ward 3, 67, Ward 4, 82.4, Ward 5, 78.8, and Ward 6, 75.7. Citywide, it's about 77.38%. So again, no huge swings within the wards. It's about 12% among some of the difference among some of the wards. When we look at the African American population, non-Hispanic, Ward 1, 8.9, Ward 2, 7.4, Ward 3, 16.5, Ward 4, 7.8, Ward 5, 8.7, and Ward 6, 8.8. Citywide, that is a 9.59%. So still pretty close in all those. The one in Ward 3, although there's no minority population in any of the wards, that 16.5% is a little bit higher than the, it's almost double than some of the other wards that are 7 or 8%. American Indian, Alaskan Native, Ward 1, 2.8%, Ward 2, 1.9, Ward 3, 2.2, Ward 4, 1.7, Ward 5, 1.7, Ward 6, 2.1, with an overall of about 2.1, so all within the twos, ones and twos. Yes, 1.7, 1.7, and 2.1, with a citywide of 2.1. The Asian non-Hispanic population, Ward 1, 2.2, Ward 2, 2.1, Ward 3, 3.1, Ward 4, 2.4, Ward 5, 4.08, Ward 6, 2.5, with an overall citywide of 2.77, so very close, other than Ward 5 has 4%, so it's a little bit, a couple percentages more. And then the rest are just other, and that falls into citywide about 1.1%, and it's about 1% in each one of the wards. And so from a demographic situation, that's what we have with the existing wards. And then wherever the new lines come up with, then we'll be able to, the software will tell us right away, whatever we move a line, how these numbers change.
Thank you, Keith. So let's take a minute and go right around, starting with you, Aaron. Let's take a minute, Wendy, for everybody, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back. So on those two things, specifically 5% or higher, or keeping it around 5%, Aaron with the deviation base, and then the minority representation. What comments or questions do you have about that?
So I read everything. I read the document that was provided earlier, and the 5% up and down was strongly suggested to be there, so you didn't have a 10% swing. I mean, based on the Tiger software, I think it's manageable. You're not going to swing a 67% white population in Ward 3 to 85%. It's just the community makeup. And I don't think there's anything glaring from those statistics that makes this a non-manageable process. I think this is and listen, I was a math major for a very, very, very long time. The numbers yield all, right? You will figure everything out, and then something pops out at the end, and that's the best part about math, is that you can cut and slice, and especially I've used Tiger in the past. You can cut and slice and move it by a street, and it will recalculate everything. So I think that it's extraordinarily manageable, especially what we have around the table.
I don't have any comment until, but when we see the maps that you're discussing, it'll have population density, and we'll be able to see and move, not just guess, and then see what pops up.
Yeah, it'll have the exact demographic information and population, and the voting age population as well, which we don't need to make decisions based on that, but it's good to be aware.
Ms. Pat?
I think I would rather wait, too, to see what the numbers are for population. So if anything has to be, go within this 5%, we'll be able to do it, have a better judgment of what we're doing when we have numbers in front of us.
Okay.
No comment at this point.
I don't have anything to add in.
Nothing from me.
Okay. So if we're good, we hit it right at 7. Hallelujah. Look at that, Mike. Right on it. Let's take a 10-minute break. Please be back at 10 after. And when we come back, we will discuss the base of the wards, determine method for drawing, give direction for staff, and set our next meeting. Okay. Okay, guys, let's get back started here. So I just want to recap the first half of the meeting. We talked about going from 12 reps to 8 reps, and we had a discussion about that. We talked about how 12 reps does seem like too many. However, is it going to be sustainable for growth to lower that? We had a couple good comments about as fast as we are growing, should we cut back the number of reps? So a lot of good discussion there. How much can one alderman really support? I think Ms. Wendy had talked about that. Let's see, 5% population, that's pretty cut and dry. I mean, pretty basic there. All right, so moving forward here, I'd like to discuss a base for the wards. So there's a couple examples there in your meeting notes where you could break up the wards. It could be subdivisions, existing wards, school zones, voting precincts, fire zones, et cetera. I would rule out the voting precincts because I've looked at those and those are a little wonky. But there are lots of ways to redistrict. And so I'd like to take 2 minutes and go around, starting with Aaron, and talk about the different ways that you think we should look at redrawing the map. Because remember, the goal here is to leave this meeting with some ideas for the planning committee to come back to the next meeting. So Aaron, if you'd like to start.
Where you click it over one street and it'll redistribute. I mean, you're talking about playing with the margins, right? The northernmost boundary of Ward 5 remains where it is. What you do is you start, redistributing based on street level, including more in 6, but clipping off the other side to include in 3. And I think that's just what we have to do. I think we have to go through the exercise, knowing that the 10,292 is our target. But I think it's very, very important that we decide on a number of wards first. I think that you have to know what the denominator is before you know what to divide it by, before you know how to divide it. So I think it's very important. I think it's very important that we decide a number of wards, and then we can play with the numbers at the street level to come into that 5% tolerance up or down. But I think that's where it starts, is the denominator.
Yeah, just to mention, when we're moving around in the software, we're going to need to stay in the block groups, because I think it would let us get outside of that, but then I think it's going to mess up some of the demographic data and some of the data. So I think probably at the block group level would be the appropriate place to do it. It's a small geographic level of the census, but if we get down to the street level, we may be able to do that. But I don't know how much information we'd lose in that process.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but every time we make that change, it recalculates
Oh,
and
yeah.
tells you where you are.
Yes,
And so
that's
I just wanted to level set.
Yes.
All right, I agree with my colleague. I think we need to decide if do we want 6, do we want 8 words of recommendation? Do we want to take some of these bigger words, the 6 and, do we want to divide some of those in half that are the biggest ones? And if we do that, once we've decided on how many words we want, 5 and 6, are they going to be too big? 2 is big. Do we divide those down? And then once we do that, we can look at demographics by population, like per section. So if we take it, we can see how many minorities are in this group, so we shift it around. We're not just shifting populations, we're shifting those percentages, and we can see that as a live thing. Is that a computer screen that we're all going to be looking at up here? How do we see that all
Keith,
at the same time?
If you'd like to answer that, I think it's the computer screen we're looking at here, and you simply just put in the data and we can see how it changes. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have access to the software, and we'll project it up on the screen, and then we'll have whatever the lines are that you come up with. And then as you want to move lines, we can move them here in this room in a matter of minutes, and then have that data as to what that population is, and then drill down in any demographic data we want to as well. And so we can do that very easy and very quickly in a meeting.
Okay, so to clarify, it's not very laborious, it's not very time-consuming, it's something we can do we can say, hey, let's move it this block level over
Yes.
and see what that does to our numbers, and we can shift it a few times.
That's correct.
Before we finalize our recommendation. Thank you.
Yes.
It's a great question. Ms. Pat?
I think I'm a pass right now. And the reason why, because I keep looking where we cannot move the lake, that's for sure. And the way Ward 2, the lake is splitting Ward 2 up.
And just to say something to that is it says here in the notes, subdivisions, existing ward school zones, there's no reason why you couldn't split up per peninsulas.
Right.
You know, you have a
okay.
ward in one peninsula and a ward here, instead of the lake splitting up, which I agree with you. What's the point of that? You have 1, you have 2, 3, 4, 5,
Right.
and there you go.
Right.
So I agree with you. And there's no reason why you couldn't do that, right, Keith?
Yes, that's correct. This kind of is the way that it is there. You know, you want areas that you're going to create as wards to have similarities. I
Right.
mean, you could argue that there are similarities because of the lakefront, but, you know, they're just held together by a very thin piece up here on
okay.
Main Street. So
Yeah.
typically, you don't want to cross a large body of water with a ward typically, but.
Am I still within my time to say that the
Yeah.
very first thing we were recommended is that compact and contiguous? And the first thing I did was look at 2 and go, that doesn't look very contiguous to me.
No, and that's a great point, because I thought the same thing when they first gave me this. I was like, well, what sense does that make? It makes no sense. But you remember, keeping in mind that you want to keep it as similar as possible. You want to try to keep all the similarities there. So, okay. Ms. Pat, anything else?
That was it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, I think, as my colleagues have mentioned, I think we should first decide on the number of wards we want to have, and then from there we can kind of go forward. I do know that, you know, people, they move to areas not based on wards, they move to areas based on schools, as what you and I talked about. And so I would be loath to, you know, make any recommendations for changing school districts to avoid a civil war in our county. But yes, that's all I have to add.
So just to reiterate what you said, you said that we should look at possibly
Determine the number of wards.
and also maybe looking at doing the wards based on school districts?
No.
Because there's 6 main elementary schools, I think, so that would make sense if there's 6 wards, there's 6.
Yeah. I think
It's a
the first-
possibility.
I think the first option is to first look at, to determine how many wards we want to have.
Okay.
Yeah, and go from there.
Okay?
I will concur. I think the number of wards is critical. You can't do the math. If you don't have a denominator, I can't do the math for you. I do have a question. What is, if anything, the impact to the city to go from 6 to 8 wards? Is there any, I don't even know what to ask. Is there a financial impact? Is there an infrastructure impact of any kind that we would need to consider?
Yeah, if you went to 8 wards, then you're going to end up with a number you can't divide with the 12. So you'd end up, it'd get confusing if you went to 8 wards and you had maintained 12 aldermen.
Oh, sure.
That would be difficult. It's not impossible, but it'd be very complicated, and probably more complicated than it needs to be. And on the 8 is the state statute in regards to the maximum, other than us being grandfathered in, the maximum number of aldermen, not the maximum number of wards.
So
But we
just to
could
reiterate,
go
what you're
to-
asking is we could go to 8 wards with 8 representatives.
With 8 representatives. I'm just
Yeah,
wondering,
that's-
looking at the numbers, if we're at 62,000 approximate right now, with 8 wards, we're back to basically the 2010 number per ward at 8 wards,
Right.
irrespective of the number of aldermen per ward, understanding that
Yes.
we would have to go down to 8 if we went to 8 wards.
Yeah, yes. And if you had 8 wards and you had suggestion with changes in the total overall number of aldermen, then that'd be a little tricky because, the wards might get changed, but then the number of aldermen may not. And then
Yeah,
you're gonna-
election cycles are going to kill us
You'll end up with
here.
a kind of an odd thing. And I might just note that so everybody that's an alderman right now any term of office that they have remaining, they still go. So changing these boundaries won't mean, oh, well, now you can't serve the rest of your time. So everyone will have the opportunity to serve the rest of their time regardless of how the ward boundaries are.
There'll be a weeding out period,
Yes.
basically, if you change from one,
Yes.
if you change from one ward map of 6
Yes.
wards to an 8-ward map, 1 per, there would still be that transition period for the remaining terms.
Yes.
But back to my question, is there any consideration that we should take into consideration if I were to say 8 wards, 1 alderman per ward? Does that impact the city negatively in any way?
I can't think of what it would impact as far as from a negative, other than trying to get 12 aldermen fitting into 8 wards. That could be difficult. And I may just mention that when, you're not limited to this, but when BOMA set up the committee, there was a motion to ask, hey, can you look at 6 wards and 4 wards, and it failed. So that directive wasn't necessarily there, but there wasn't, at that meeting, there wasn't anyone suggesting 8 wards. Just to share that if you haven't seen that particular meeting.
Yeah, what you're saying, Keith, just correct me if I'm wrong, is that there was a motion to go from 6 to 4, and that motion failed, right?
For the committee, direct the committee specifically to consider it.
Correct. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But clarification, we could come up with whatever we want.
Yeah.
We could come up with 12 wards if we wanted to. It's just within
Yes.
our right. Okay,
Yes.
all right, good.
Okay, thank you.
I think I can clear up the whole Ward 2 thing. Growing up in Hendersonville, I grew up in Ward 2, but back in the day, the two peninsulas were vastly different as far as demographics, income levels, and that's not the case at all today. And I think it's silly that they're split like that, just like you guys do too. But I think that was to get both equal representation for both of the peninsulas back in the day. Another question I have is, when we're redrawing these lines, are there certain numbers of citizens that our fire and police departments can handle as far as the fire halls, or, we've got to look at that too, as far as, this fire hall can only handle so many residents and that type thing.
Yeah, those are good things to kind of look at and be aware of, that data, but that's totally separate from this, that our fire department does look at all of those things, and their fire districts are related to that, but they're related a little bit differently, where they're looking at time of response time, which is a little different when you're looking at ward boundaries for political purposes. Response time from some physical point is not necessary. But when we're looking at that from a standpoint of a fire hall, how big of an area it covers, it's got a lot to do with response time and the roads and all of that, those types of things.
Because you'll have, Keith, thank you, you'll have the wards, but, fire districts are a completely separate thing right there with all.
Yes.
So if you, just to answer your question, if you change the wards, it's not going to have any effect. I think this is what you're asking on maybe
No.
tax dollars going to fire departments or anything like that. Will it affect them negatively monetarily?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I don't
all
think
right.
that would.
It's a great question, though. Any other question? Okay, great. All right, so just to reiterate a few things, determine number of wards is really important. There was talk, Wendy, about 8 wards, and I'd like to maybe go back to that in a minute. Playing with the numbers, and Keith kind of already went over that. Determined method for drawing the lines. So let's just go around really quick and just throw out a number so that we can kind of move this forward a little bit. Aaron, I'll start with you. And just off the top of your mind, wards, representatives.
One of our charges is to keep it simple with small changes. And so, 6 wards, 2 representatives per ward, is the smallest change we can make, because we would be really not altering that at all. We would be redrawing district lines, right? And that would be the end of it. I go back to the 2010 census, and if you have 50,000 people with 12 aldermen, they represent roughly 4,000 people per, right? If you went to 8 and you're sitting at 64,000, you're basically doubling the constituency. This is where it goes back to other cities, like-sized cities, and how many boards operate effectively with X amount of aldermen, because I don't have a good grasp on how many constituents one alderman can properly govern. And so I have a question about that. The easiest thing is 6 wards, 2 aldermen per ward, and have it at that. My feeling is maybe 4 wards, 2 aldermen per, but you're still sitting at 8,000 constituents per alderman. So, I mean, there's a lot of considerations we have to make, because as we sit today, it's about 5,000. You've grown 10%. You've gone from roughly 4,000 constituents per alderman to 5,000, which seems manageable, but I don't know if 8,000 or 10,000 becomes unmanageable. So that's my question.
Yeah.
So I answered your question with a question, so I do apologize.
No, that's great. So I just want to repeat exactly what you said. So, the simplest thing, because that's what we're here to do, is keep it simple, stupid, is 6 wards and 12 reps, 2 per each ward, with the possibility of 4 wards, 2 reps, bringing it down to 8. It's a possibility. Okay.
Because again, my gut feel is if 12 is too many, what's the right size?
It could be 8.
It could be
9,
5
could be
wards
5,
with 2 representatives
Right.
per. I don't want to stick with multiples of 4, right? We could do 5 wards with 2 representatives apiece, and then you've gotten back to 6,000 per. So, the math will tell us, I believe. So.
All right, very good. Ms. Debbie? So just to reiterate before you answer, so we've got 8 wards, 1 representative per ward on the table, 6 wards, 12 reps, 4 wards, 2 reps, go.
I think that we are most likely to find a recommendation that actually is heard if we are flexible. And I really think that a recommendation of keeping it exactly the way it is, just moving lines, so 6 wards, 2 per, we have to have a recommendation that represents that no change other than just boundaries. We have to. If we wanted to consider moving those lines around and looking and see what 8 looks like with 1 each, I'm 100% for seeing what that looks like. I'm not opposed to 4 with 2 per. My one question with 2 representatives per ward is just going back to, is it effective to have 2 people representing 1 ward? Is it really necessary to have 2 people? My gut says no, that you might get better response and more effective leadership with 1 person making decisions rather than deferring to the other, and this one defers back. And I think that I like the recommendation of going down to 1, however many wards we do. I think 8 actually makes sense, but I'm open to whatever. But I think we absolutely have to have more than 1 recommendation. 1, things as they are, and 2, kind of pie in the sky.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Debbie. Ms. Pat, so we've got 8 with 8 reps and keeping it what it is now, or 4 with 2 reps.
I may be thinking too much here. And the reason I'm saying that, because when we talk to the aldermen, and this is a part-time job, they do not have anyone to help them other than coming, calling the department and say, hey, can you help this constituent and this type of thing. And I like to still keep it this simple, but then have the option as well. But having the way it is now, and maybe thinking it through with the 8, with the 1, based on the numbers in that ward, the population. Because being in a part-time position, I may be thinking too much. Being a part-time position, when we call our alderman, then they call City Hall for the help. They do not have a staff to work, to work with them to really get things done. So, that's what I'm thinking. So I would say, yes, the simple, I like that. But then when the numbers are populated, how does it look based on, should we go with the 8-to-1?
Very good. You still got some time left. Anything else?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Mr. Mitchell?
I like leaving as it is, as option one, 6 wards, 2 aldermen per ward, and also 8 wards with 8 aldermen. I do like the other comment that was made earlier that if we reduce from 12 to 8, we can't go back up to 12. So is there some value in keeping 12, right? And to your point, Debbie, that, are 2 aldermen needed in some of these wards? I don't know. But once we go back, we can't go back up. So I think that's something that I think the aldermen will certainly raise questions about, and their constituents as well.
Okay, so looking at both those, that seems to be the consensus. Ms. Wendy?
I agree completely, Debbie. It's a great point that we need to start with what we have, with the adjustments needed to redistribute representation, and then what are some other alternatives. And I most definitely would like to look at 8 wards, 1 alderman per ward, with the caveat of, I don't know how we compare. So the information that Keith and his team bring back may show that at 8, we are so far off of the norm for any other similar-sized municipality that it's ridiculous to consider. But barring that, I would be in favor of the 8 wards, 1 alderman per ward being one of the options that we put on the table.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Okay, Mr. Mike, any final thoughts on that?
When we go to the board with our recommendation, are we going to go to the board with one? Are we going to say, this is it, or is it, we going to give them a bunch of options here, or?
Yeah, so what I think we should do is we should take 3 options. We take, hey, this is what we think as the redistricting committee, as citizens.
Because I think if we go in there with just one and say, this is it, then,
Right.
we're in trouble. But
Right.
with the growth that we're experiencing in this area, and I'm kind of like, where we're at with 12, and then you go down to 8, you're never going to go back.
Right.
And I do think that has, like he said, there's some value in that. So I'm kind of under the impression to keep it like it is, but I do like the other option of 8 wards with 1 per ward, increasing the wards but reducing the number of aldermen.
Yes.
One more comment, because
Yep.
I think we need to move in a direction. And it's something that you said about the splitting of Ward 2 that kind of rang in my head. I don't know, and I'm not gonna put any words in anybody's mouth, but I think 4 wards would be too graphically dispersed.
Okay.
I think
Yep.
your demographics
Okay.
would be too wide of a net. And truthfully, and the purpose of this is, I think, and it's gotta be, consensus opinion, that I think 4 wards is too geographically dispersed, because one of the reasons why they split Ward 2 was to make sure they captured this. If you go to 4, I think you've cast too wide of a net. Personal, but I also think we need to I think we need to go in a direction, right? Where everything's on the table now, and I agree with you. You can't give an infinite number of solutions, because what's the purpose of having a board?
Right.
So you're back to square one. So I would like to ask,
Why don't you make a motion? Just make a
I would like
motion.
to make a motion to remove the discussion of 4 wards,
Okay.
just because I think that the distribution would be kind of unmanageable at that.
Everybody
Second.
agree with that?
Second.
Everybody agree with that? Okay.
Yes.
Anybody disagree with taking off 4? Okay.
That narrows our discussion to maybe
I was just, yeah. Thank you, Wendy. And
Thank you.
all is agreeing.
And I
Yeah.
think that narrows our discussion towards an 8, 10, or 12 ward.
Yeah, go ahead, Keith. And then we'll come back to you, Debbie. You had a question.
Yes, and I just wanted to bring this up again about the 8. I think everybody kind of understands it, but with the 8, if you put forward an 8 to BOMA, there's 12 aldermen. And so that more than likely, that 12 to 8 aldermen isn't going to get resolved during the time frame of this. And if you put that up there as that, I just don't know, I don't know how that fits, because we're going to end up with something where we're going to have to come up with something where 1 or 2 wards have 3 people in them, or so, or 4, 2 wards have double in it or something. So it's going to, just the math doesn't work out with the existing aldermen with the way the process, would
Could we
would
ask
work.
for you or some member of the city staff, give us some guidance on what that transition period legally would need to look like?
Yeah, I can talk to our city attorney, and I'll need to get that information from him, and we can provide that
Bring
information.
that to the next meeting.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Yep.
I just wanted to get that out there, with the.
Basically, what you're
8.
saying is that we can present it, but the likelihood of it being
It's-
accepted is probably pretty slim.
It just can't fit within that.
Yeah.
Well,
Within
I
that
think
timeframe,
that
yeah.
further, to put words in your mouth,
Yeah.
Keith, forgive me, we all have to recognize if that were the path we went down, and that's one of the proposals we put in front of BOMA, if they were to agree to 8 wards, it's not as if it goes into effect and we wipe the slate clean and we have special elections and we elect. There would be a protracted transition period, and we just need to understand, and I think it would be valuable to include that in any proposal that we put before BOMA, what that transition would look like.
I'll find out what exactly that transition, would be. But whatever the board recommends, but eventually whatever BOMA, they have the final decision on it. But whatever they decide on how the wards are going to be, not necessarily the number of aldermen, but the ward specifically, it's going to be that for 10 years. There isn't going to be any change until the next census.
Let's go to Ms. Davies' question. Ms. Davies, you had a question?
So for what period of time are aldermen elected? 3 years?
4 years,
Four?
and they every 2 years, one of the sorry, it's a 4-year term, and as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, every 2 years, one of the aldermen from the ward that seat is up for election.
Okay,
Yeah, that's right.
That's what I thought.
It's got a
So-
rotating term to it. Every 2 years it
Yeah,
rotates.
exactly. So there would definitely be some growing pains if we went to 8, and that's no question. So if we present, and I'm for presenting 3 alternatives, 2 if that's all we want to, we know we're most likely they're going to accept the recommendation that's the least change, and we understand that completely. How many, when you look at the similar cities, can you see how many wards they have with similar populations?
Yes, we'll do that and look how many wards they have.
Because simple math says, well, let's just divide all these by 2 and make sure the demographics are there. But that is 12 people, that's still a lot of people having to make decisions. That's a lot. I know 12 we want to hold on to that number, but I don't want to hold on to an arbitrary number just because we like that number. We can't let go of 12 because we're special for having 12. I don't want to keep 12 for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, that's a great question. All right, anything else before we move forward? Any other comment? Any other questions? Okay, so it sounds like we've got 2 motions for 2 different wards. We've got one motion to keep things the way they are, which I think everybody has voiced their opinion that that's where we definitely want to do that, and then we've got a motion for 8 wards. Any other suggestions on wards and reps? Are we going to go to the board with 2, or are we going to think of another one? And I'm going to open it up for discussion.
Yes, may I ask if we have to recommend 6 or 8 or 5 or whatever it is we decide to do before we've seen the demographics?
No. I'm just saying, what do we want to tell the planning committee to plan? we can have them plan whatever.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah, multiple options, multiple options.
May I ask something just popped into my head. We're talking in even numbers, constantly in even numbers. Is there a reason, now I'm thinking about a BOMA voting and trying to make a majority decision, is there a reason we can't have 7 or 9 wards? Are we,
Yeah, what that is you've got the 12 aldermen, but then you've got Mayor Clary. So it actually ends up being an odd number.
I forgot about Mayor
Yeah.
Clary.
So
Don't
the
tell him
number
that.
of aldermen does need to be probably an even number. Because with the addition of Mayor Clary, or whoever the mayor would be in the future, then that would give you
That's the deciding
a
vote.
deciding vote.
So is there any objection to, we present this one that we see here, we present the 8 wards. Is there any objection to having the planning committee do 5 wards with 2 representatives from each ward? That would be 10 representatives. Any objection to that as a possibility?
Not from me.
No? Mr. Mitchell? No? Pat?
No.
Debbie? Any objection, Aaron? Okay, why don't we make that an option? We make 6 wards, 12 reps an option, 8 wards, 8 reps an option, 5 wards, 10 reps an option. And then somebody mentioned 4. Let's just look at it. Just, I'd like to see the math man.
Wait,
Okay?
didn't we vote on a motion to not consider 4?
Oh, well, never mind. then.
Okay.
All right, we exclude 4. No, we already threw it out. Robert, we're done. Any other suggestions for the planning committee? Because like they said, they can do multiple. We've only got 3 on the table. Any other suggestions? No? Just want to look at those? Okay, Aaron?
And this is and not to beat a dead horse, but somebody has gone through this transition before. They've changed the number of boards, and they've had to manage through election cycles. Somebody else has done this, right?
Yeah.
This is not completely and totally unprecedented, right?
Yeah.
And so somebody else has done this, and they've had to manage through it. So, I'm with you. I like 12 because it's easy. But I don't, to your point, I don't want to decide on 12 because it's easy. So.
Yeah.
Keith, maybe you can answer this question. What would be the opposition to this, to changing wards? Because, again, I go back to what I've seen in the community where there are a few signs in people's yards, no to zoning, and so I'm thinking, okay, other than schools, what from what you've seen, might be some of the opposition to this?
Yeah, I would just be speculating on what that would be, so it probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to speculate on that. But anytime there is a change from something, everyone's sort of used to, then, you've just got to be able to address, why we're making those changes. But really, I couldn't specifically address what that would be. But ultimately, that lies with our Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the majority vote that
And,
occurs there.
I mean, to state the obvious, I think we all know this, we are suggesting potentially a very radical change to the group that will feel the change in their responsibility and in their role with the city potentially.
Yeah.
So it's going to be personal.
Yeah.
But I think if we come with well-thought-out options, most definitely starting with, here's where we are today with the appropriate shifts, and then a couple of well-defined, justified alternatives, then we've done what we've been asked to do.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so just a few things here. So we've got 3 on the table. Let's just stick with that for now. I'd like to start with Aaron and go around the table one last time on directions for how we feel like these need to be drawn. And so, again, we've said 2 doesn't make sense. So should we do peninsulas? Should we look at that? Should that be an option? Should we look at school zones? Should that be an option? What else was on there? Subdivisions? Just a base, a block, yeah. So Aaron, starting with you, just give us a few suggestions for the planning committee on some things that we can look at.
If there are in fact 6 elementary schools, I think that's an easy place to start.
I don't know if there's 6 elementary schools, but there's like 6.
I think that you can allow the infrastructure, I mean, even if it goes to the fire districts. I mean, I don't know how many fire districts, but if there were 6 fire districts, it almost says that,
6 now, but there'll be 7.
okay.
After we put the last one.
Oh,
Well, way to mess it up,
I know.
fire district, come
So,
on.
but I mean, I think that you have infrastructure that should dictate how it falls, right? Whether it be elementary schools, whether it be fire districts. And
Okay.
if it's the previous fire districts, that's fine. You know, you go back to, I know that you got a 7th, but where it is right now, it's 6. And classify, just see how many people fall in that. I mean,
Okay.
happy accident is 10,282 falls in every single fire district, and it's as easy as that. So, but I think you let the infrastructure dictate that, because if we're gonna say, you know, cut the peninsulas, and I believe that we should, I believe the peninsulas should be that, and then you have, you know, up above, you have another 4 that sit. But I think that when you have the 2 largest wards sitting north of the peninsulas anyways, I think that kind of gives you some boundaries. I think you want to go to natural boundaries if you can. That's why we're talking peninsulas. And so, yep, that's my recommendation, is let the infrastructure dictate this somewhat.
Thank you. Ms. Debbie?
I agree with that completely. When you look at what is currently 1, 2, and 4, the growth on those, in those areas is not completely maxed out. Obviously, there are still, you know, big plots of open land there, but not nearly like what we see in 5 and 6. So looking at combining those natural boundaries where it makes sense that the Walton Ferry, Saunders Ferry Peninsula be considered a ward, Indian Lake Peninsula be considered a ward, and then look and see about these maybe 3, 6, and 5 becoming the other wards. So, yeah.
Keith, that makes sense, what she just said. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so-
All right. Thank you, Ms. Debbie. Ms. Pat?
I'm going to go along with Miss Debbie, with what she said, because that definitely makes sense, especially when it comes to the peninsulas, because we know for a fact, even though in Ward 1, there's still some vacant plots there, but we cannot move into the lake. We can only move north.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Anything else? You still have time. You good? Okay. All right, Mr. Mitchell?
I favor the, looking at it at the existing wards.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
So the natural boundaries? Okay.
Yep.
All right, good deal. Ms. Wendy?
I concur, the 2 peninsulas as natural first options. And then I would ask, in looking at the rest of the area to be mapped, is there happenstance a large development of comparable size in geographically dispersed areas where we could then use those as bases beyond, or are they all clustered in 5 and 6?
So wait a minute, what you're saying is, so if we did 1 peninsula, 2 peninsula, and then we look at the developments?
The rest of
the
it,
developments?
if we
Okay.
could somehow center those around development, because as Pat said, and Debbie and Aaron all, I believe, have said, we know that's where the growth has been primarily, and will continue to be as we look at projections. That would be the only thought I would have to try to base us, when we're going from the 6 to looking at 8,
Okay.
or changing, then finding some kind of base around a development, if that's feasible.
Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. Mike, before I ask you, just one quick question I have for Keith is, outside the 2 peninsulas, one thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is we're grouping everybody together, not only, commonalities. Is there any particular commonality above the 2 peninsulas that we want to look at outside of developments?
I mean, looking at the list, I would say voting precincts seems kind of odd to me, because those are just
Yeah, we just throw that-
crazy.
That doesn't make sense.
School zones, I think, are tied to population, at least to some degree, right?
Possibly.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Keith, yeah.
yeah, you have kind of dividing line is what's east of Indian Lake Boulevard and what's west of, which is also Drake's Creek down
Okay.
through there as well. So that's sort of you've got sort of a natural divide there. And I might mention, I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm projecting that just based on the things we've already approved, over the next 10 years, our growth will be somewhat equal to what it's been in the last 10 years and the previous 10 years. So our growth in 10 years from now, most likely will be somewhere between 9 to 11,000.
Okay.
So it's going to be pretty much the same as it's been 10 year, the last 10 years, and then the 10 years previous to that as well.
All right, okay.
But-
Sorry, Mike, go right ahead. Oh,
I'm sorry, just one question on that, Keith. So don't question that projection at all, but can we assume that because the peninsulas are basically maxed
Yeah.
out, that just as we saw a much higher percentage of growth from 2010 to 2020 in Ward 5 for sure, Ward 6 for sure, we would assume that the greater percentage of growth is going to be in those
It will.
areas that are beyond the peninsulas?
Yeah, and we know specifically where that growth is going to occur, and it's going to be specifically the most of the growth is going to be in 3, 6, and 5. There'll be some growth in the peninsulas, but the majority is going to be in 6, 5, and 3.
I think whether we go with, stick with the 6, go to 8, I mean, our goal here is, as far as legality, is equal population in each ward. And then also minority representation as far as gerrymandering and that type thing. And then it's got to be compact and contiguous, I guess is how you say that. And what we have here is not that with that Ward 2 being split. And I think that's going to have to be taken care of. I know Ward 6, I think there's a huge development going in behind Lowe's, 200 houses there. But we can't, it's hard to predict rooftops that's going to happen in the 10 years, and Keystone is probably about the same as happened in the last 10 years. But what we've got to base our recommendation off is current population that we've been given from the last census. And so that's my, I think all these are great ideas, but I think we need to decide, whether we're going to go stick with 6 or we're going to go and go to the board with several options, I guess, if that's the way we want to handle this thing.
I agree wholeheartedly, right? There will be another board like this in 10 years, and they will have to address the growth but we have to use the data that's presented to us today, right? And so, yes, you have to take the accommodations, but you're still focusing on that 10,282 or 10,292 number based on the current population. So, I mean, it's good to have it in the back of your mind, but it can't be our driving force in the recommendation.
okay, thank you, everybody, for your input there. So just to finalize this, what we want to give to the planning committee is an option for what we're looking at today with 6 wards and 12 representatives, and an option for 8 wards and 8 representatives. Do I have a motion for that? That's what we have the planning committee take and bring back to our next meeting. Aaron? Yep, sorry. Yeah, 5 and 2. That was 1, 2, sorry. Yeah, I forgot I threw that out there at the last minute.
1, 5, and 2, 6, and 2.
Perfect. Okay, so those are our 3 options.
And I will get back next time with the legalities. I don't know that 5 and 2 would be an option because we're grandfathered in at the 12. And changing it, I just need to make sure, but I think legally if we change it, it would have to go to 8 or below.
But yeah, if you would just
Yeah.
get back to this, because the
Yeah.
5 and 2 may.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll find that out.
All right, so that's the option we have. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? All in favor? Okay. Yes, Ms. Pat?
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry, okay. Hey, she's on that button over there. Okay, and then so we have a motion, or we have a vote for that. Next, the lines drawn, I heard we should have the planning committee look at infrastructure, school and fire. We have the planning committee look at the natural boundaries, the 2 peninsulas, and then 4 wards in the top as options. Do we have a motion on the floor for that. Aaron moves, second. Okay, Wendy, seconds, all in favor? All opposed? No. Ayes have it. Just one last discussion before we move on to planning our next meeting. Is there any other questions or comments on the floor at this time? Yes, sir. Oh, I thought you were jumping the gun.
And so I have one. I have one question. Is there anything that's off the table? Is there anything we can't do? Is there any constraints, right? Because we're talking about population, we're talking about block, is there anything that says, well, this has to be in, these two things have to be in the same ward? Or are there any constraints that we have to consider?
Keith?
I don't believe so, as long as we're meeting what the comptroller's guidelines are, and that the areas have similarities, and there's not some obvious deformity to, it's something that doesn't make
It's not
sense.
gerrymandered.
But otherwise, and no at-large, yeah. And
You
so-
can't, at-large, just to clarify, is can't have one ward.
Can't, yeah. And that's really it. But as far as where the boundaries can be, but as you can see, as it's distributed with the numbers we're talking about, there's going to be something similar, similar to this. There are reasons probably why the lines are where they are, even though you may look at recommending changes. A lot of these lines seem very reasonable. But they've got to get bigger, and they've got to move around to reflect the population change.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Keith. So, let's move to our next meeting. Keith, we're at a timeline, so you tell me when we need to have our next meeting, because we need to wrap this up pretty soon, so I think we're coming to our deadline, as Ms. Pat had talked about earlier. So give us some options, and then everybody can get out their phone. Thank you for respecting our no phone rule here.
I was only on my phone because I was using the stopwatch.
I know, that's
Okay.
fantastic. You did, and hey, thank you, Wendy. You did a fantastic job with that stopwatch. I mean, she was so polite. You got 30 seconds. You're doing a great job.
It's not gonna take us long as staff to get all the information that we've talked about this evening, so that's not a real issue.
Next week's a legal holiday, next Monday's a legal holiday, so I'm assuming this place is down.
It is not, but I am on vacation that day.
And next week's fall break.
Yeah, next week's fall break, so for a lot of.
Didn't we just have fall break?
Yeah, this week's fall break.
So Robertson, okay.
This week's fall
Somebody's
break in
fall break.
Henderson.
Yeah, this week's fall break.
Really, the quicker the better to get to the second meeting, because I think this second meeting, you're going to have all this data and information to really spur. Yeah.
Are you suggesting maybe even later this week? I mean, is that, when you say quick, I mean, I want to know.
That might be too quick.
Okay.
So let's look at a couple dates here. So we can't do Monday, that's a holiday, the 12th. Tuesday, you have the Hendersonville City Council meeting, is that correct?
That's correct.
So we can't do Tuesday, the 12th. On Columbus Day. So the mayor said that we can use this time on Columbus Day, Monday. I mean, I don't take that day off, so
I wouldn't be here that day, but I mean, I don't necessarily have to be.
I think Keith should be here for that day.
So, but
How about Wednesday the 13th?
Wednesday, the 13th, I am good that day, I think. I've got something with leadership, Sumner County.
Can we do it remotely?
So
yeah.
are you both out of town
How
that
about the
week?
4th?
You're out of that town that week? Okay.
Yeah.
When
How
Monday,
about the 19th? That's when we typically hold this for a planning commission work session, and we're not going to be having it that evening, so I know the room is available, and that
is
would
that
give.
within the time frame?
Yeah, that would give us plenty of time frame to get what we need, and then probably, if we meet on the 19th, then thinking about the meeting we might have after that, could be fairly quickly. It might be later that week or the first of the following week. Maybe not setting that date just now, but kind of thinking about it like that. I think once we, at this second meeting, we'll get all this information and have that, and I'll bring our mapping personnel here, and we'll be able to pull all that up, and should get way down the road on, narrowing down on what your recommendations may be, to where a third meeting may be just sort of coming back and touching base with that and finalizing it, possibly. It could happen like that.
So let,
I can do it, I'll just be remote on the 19th, 20th, I'm back, sorry.
does that, can we do the 19th if someone's remote?
We don't have it we don't have it in our ordinance to allow you to do that. However, you can listen in. So when it comes to a vote, we can that. You can listen in and stuff.
So, but we have a committee of what?
Well,
seven?
that's not good.
We have a committee of 7. I mean, is the difference between the 19th and the 20th a gigantic deal? Or the 19th and the 21st?
No?
I mean,
You
yeah.
want to do 21st?
I mean, the 21st, if,
I'm here the 20th.
The only thing I've got is going to be softball for my daughter. That'd be the only thing, and I don't see anything scheduled on the 20th. We do on the 30th, or the 21st, but not the 20th.
how about the 20th?
Is everybody okay on the 20th?
That'll work for you.
Okay, but late,
That's okay.
but we wouldn't vote.
Late is
We just wouldn't
approval.
vote in the first half hour.
Anything until they're.
Yep.
Miss Pat?
I'm flexible.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell? Wendy?
20th is good, thank you.
Okay. 20th?
20th?
And just put it in the notes that Debbie is going to be here late.
Yeah, I'll be down
She'll
the road,
be,
but I'll be here.
she'll be
by-
tardy.
I think I can do it by 6:15.
All right.
Just be right up here at church.
So we'll do another 6 to 8.
I have a question.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
If we meet on the 20th, then Keith, you give us the information, because, and Mr. Mayor, what I'm looking at is, because of how BOMA meets, they meet twice a month. Will we be able to, you think, Keith, that, how does that day look as far,
Their
Just to
second
present
meeting
it.
will be the 26th.
they're gonna meet the 26th, oh, my thing went
Yeah,
off,
they're
the
12th and
26th.
Are they, or that's in November? Okay. Yeah, so if we're there, we won't get on that, but they could get it to, what deadline did you have for this?
The 3rd or 4th.
That's not,
We would miss that,
yeah.
So,
yeah. Oh, well, for the
Yeah, for the
board, the
commit-
next board meeting would be November 9th. So they would have a few weeks there to,
so we have the 20th, maybe
Discuss.
the 27th, just
Yeah.
20th, 27th, and then
and then have.
Do you
third
want me to
or
go ahead and
fourth.
put the 27th on the calendar? I can
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we might as well schedule all of our meetings.
Right,
I
And then,
totally
and
agree.
then
Yeah.
cancel one if we don't need it.
I would much rather have them on my.
right.
Me too.
So I
Is this
just,
a resolution or?
Does it have a public hearing?
Oh, that was my
Yeah.
next
I would
question.
assume it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said
Okay,
the 9th
good.
is the next BOMA meeting?
That would be the next, but then I assume, are we canceling Thanksgiving? Yeah, sorry, not to yell at you.
Jason keeps looking at me like, you know what you're doing is wrong.
Do you do the 20th, 27th, and November 3rd?
2027.
I'm willing to schedule a special meeting for it. What the board expects is that y'all have some recommendation by November 3rd, and then if y'all do that, that's all I've asked of y'all, and that's all the board has asked you. It's at the board's hands at that point.
On November 3rd.
I think that's fine.
Just getting it before that January 1st deadline if we cancel.
October 27th.
okay, so let's back it up a little bit. So our next meeting will take place on October the 20th. That's a Wednesday.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that'll be a 2-hour meeting, and at that time, Keith and his planning committee will come back with recommendations on what we have decided here. And then if we can't decide that day, by that day, we'll move another meeting on Wednesday, the 27th.
Yes.
Okay? Is there any objection to that?
No.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
That's okay.
Do we have a motion on that? Sorry,
We have a motion.
we need a motion.
Uh,
I make a motion.
Aaron makes a motion. Do we have a second? Wendy makes a second. All in favor, say aye. Okay. Ayes have it.
And probably, Mr. Chairman, on that 20th,
20th.
probably instead of 2-hour meeting, probably a 3-hour. And then you can.
Okay.
Then if you're looking to possibly get all the way through it.
Okay.
And then determine after that if you need additional
Okay.
meeting.
All right, so let's make that a 3-hour meeting.
That's on the
And-
20th.
Yes, 6. And Debbie is going to bring food. I'm sure she's a phenomenal cook with 9 kids. Okay, let's see, we set the next meeting.
Okay.
All right, so we have our next meeting scheduled. Is there any other discussion before we close out?
Is there,
no other meeting needed after the 27th, right?
There's no other meeting needed after the 27th. We have a meeting on the 20th that's 3 hours to go over Keith's recommendation and his planning committee. And then if we need to go to another meeting, it will be scheduled for October 27th. And I would say, I think that should be a firm deadline. We have it done, and I think our next meeting, we should have it done, honestly. Do I hear yep, sorry.
if, not necessarily thinking of it right now, if you think of it in the next couple days of somebody that you would like to have here at your next meeting or the subsequent meeting after that, let us know. We'll make sure that person is here. Also, if at some point we do think it'd be important that you take public comment before you make a recommendation.
And we can put that out to everybody before the next meeting.
We can do that.
And that'll just be done digitally?
No, they need to show up.
Okay,
I mean, they can send a letter, they can send an email, but they can also show up.
okay.
Well, Erica's going to take care of, Erica takes care of this, right?
Sure.
Okay, without any other questions or objections, do I hear a motion to
Move to
adjourn?
adjourn.
Move to adjourn, Debbie, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.